you, Mayor Mulder. Deputy Mayor Barris.
Present.
Councillor Govesi.
Present.
Councillor Luciani.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
Councillor Rosehart. I'm noting that she is present. We're having some difficulty with her audio. And Councillor Esseltine sends her regrets. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, we called meeting to order. It's a special council meeting. Members of the public, if you're joining us, you're aware that there was a discussion at the meeting of the 9th of August relative to a planning decision that I think the discussion for members of council and those present had seen some expediency for. I had kept track of that through the clerk's office and the planning department as well. And we had the opportunity to expedite that for the benefit of that development and at least bring the bylaw forward in an expedient fashion. So that it was the nature of the meeting as called by and as provided for in the procedural bylaw for today's meeting. Subsequent to that, there were a couple of additional time-sensitive items that the clerk's department had addressed the head of council, and there was concurrence that those would appear appropriately on the agenda because of the nature of them, and they appeared originally on this agenda as well. Councillor Luciani, there is no closed session today. Councillor Luciani, you have a resolution to adopt the agenda.
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Barris that the agenda as prepared for the special council meeting of August 30th, 2021 be approved.
Is there any discussion to that agenda? Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not on the agenda. I wonder if I could have yourself or maybe the CAO introduce our fire chief just prior to the bringing in the bylaw to officially accept.
I think that's extremely appropriate, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for reminding us of that. A couple new faces there, and it's a pleasure. And we'll appropriately ask the CAO to do that introduction at, I think, at the time that you've suggested. Are there any other comments on the agenda? Support the direction of council. I will, unfortunately, as the agenda has been circulated, did not accurately represent the direction of head of council as contained in the procedural bylaw. There's been comments of that, and I would be less than transparent, especially as I look at the streaming service. I don't know if anyone's watching our live streaming service at a special council meeting, which was properly called, but properly called for items that the head of council had confirmed, and there's additional items that are not, and I'll speak to those at that time. So I'd be less than transparent not to be completely open about that, especially relative to public engagement. So we're prepared to call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof from members of that are present relative to any of the items that are on the council agenda today? That's just recently been approved. Seeing none? Don't see any. Seeing none, we'll continue with a notice of motion. There's a notice of motion. Councillor Govesi, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Parker that the airport master plan recently completed by Explorer Solutions be accepted and adopted by council, subject to the following conditions that staff take into consideration: the comments and concerns conveyed by the advisory committee when determining future expenditures and projects, that the drawing depicting the expansion of hangars, taxiways, and access road be adopted as it appears in the master plan, that the staff place a priority on projects that address safety and expansion, as well as moving towards creating an airport fund with municipal partners in the County of Oxford, and that staff continue to share information on upcoming projects outlined in the master plan with the advisory committee for comment and review.
Just before, if you're entertaining discussion, Are you introducing this as a motion with a seconder, or are you introducing it as a notice of motion to be brought forward at a subsequent meeting, primarily being the 13th of September?
I believe I listed a seconder, and I believe I sent it in adequate time to be included in the agenda.
Okay, just remind that, fully respect that it made it to the agenda. And now that's, the agenda's been approved. So we'll proceed with discussion. I won't, I've got my concerns relative to calling it the resolution out of order, but it did make it to the agenda. And I respect the fact that the mover with the seconder had done their due diligence. So I will allow you to speak to the resolution that you have on the floor, Councillor Gavese.
Thank you. Okay, so firstly, there was a resolution at the last meeting that it was received as information, and then there were a bunch of different points. And this is really for clarity for staff, because staff needs full direction that the master plan has been like accepted and approved so that they can move forward. There's a lot of time sensitive things. Firstly, the funding that was received has a timeline on it that needs to be spent by the spring. So they need to get moving on some projects. And secondly, the window for building hangars is closing at the airport rapidly. And there's some people that want to get going that cannot go without having the master plan approved and the drawing approved. Thirdly, I did check with the clerk, and it was my understanding that I could bring forward this motion at the meeting, that I'm not in contravention of procedural bylaws. So
No, I want to make it clear, you're not, Councillor Gavese. You asked for something and it was granted. I want you to understand that you did what was in your interests appropriate.
I don't believe that this is in my interest. I believe this is in the
No, I meant the interest that you
Airport.
represented sending something in within a recognized time frame.
Yes,
Okay.
and I believe that it's time sensitive, and if it's put off, it wastes essentially another 2 weeks with the building window closing at the airport. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Rosehart's back. Is Mr. Reyes in attendance today?
No, he's not.
Was there reference to something relative to funding that's in the public domain? Mr. Pratt, are you aware of that, or Ms. Poat? Is she? Are you aware of that?
Mr. Mayor, if you're referring to the RATI grant, I'm aware that the municipality received approximately $530,000.
Okay, good. I guess it's got some airplay, so it's in a public meeting. Further questions or comments from members of council? I just reiterate, Councillor Gavese, support your opportunity. That was not, any of my comments are not in opposition to your ability to introduce. The procedural bylaw is quite explicit in the time frame to bring a notice of motion and a seconder in advance for a regular meeting of council. It does not speak to, as a matter of fact, in its absence, does not speak to special council meetings that were called for a unique purpose. What is, in your interpretation, since you brought this, and I'm talking in relative terms to a very similar lengthy resolution that was introduced on the 9th of August. What makes this so time sensitive on the 30th of August as opposed to not advancing some of this material on the 9th of August?
Well, in the last week or so, I've been approached, the last couple of weeks, been approached by like a few people that are trying to develop at the airport. And the staff had replied that the master plan had not passed. And that really was not my intention. And maybe I own that the resolution was not clear enough at the last meeting. So I'm trying to make it very clear for staff so that things can proceed forward. And just putting it off to the 13th just delays it for 2 more weeks. Like I don't believe I'm in the wrong to bring this resolution here. And maybe I could look to the clerk's department for clarification. If I am wrong, I could move it to the 13th, but I don't believe I am.
This is the last, you have done nothing. Councillor Gavezi, you had not your own interest in advancing something, interest in bringing clarity, which I would thank you for. It was raised by the chair multiple times when we debated that issue on the 9th, the lack of clarity. So I'd stand by that myself. I guess, I have multiple questions, not to you, to process. The fact that we've just, advanced a community strategic plan that talks about governance and public engagement. And I look down now and I don't even know if we have one person watching this. But is there anything then, there was a resolution that was adopted by council as a whole on the 9th of August. Then there's a subsequent one bringing in your reference additional clarity on the 30th of August. And agenda is adopted by council. So that's fine. I respect that. I put my oar in the water and row in the same direction. But you're satisfied that this is bringing clarity and that the items also contained on the 9th of August are part and parcel of moving forward towards the ratification and direction to staff for the airport master plan.
Yes.
Okay. That's good. No, relative to the airport master plan, any comments I would have, I'd be reiterating items that I had on the 9th of August. I wasn't satisfied with it in its entirety. Now it appears we're adopting it in its entirety if this passes. There was trepidation and some concerns back then. I've got, I won't read the entire documentation from the report from Mr. Reyes from the Airport Advisory Committee that gave no recommendation for adoption of the airport master plan, but did include some material information. And I would remind members of council, and if there's people from the public listening, that indeed that advisory committee, and we thank them for their continued work, is comprised of airline transport pilot, flight instructor, airline transport pilot operations manager, OPP aviation operator, commercial pilot, chief pilot instructor, engineers, and a couple private pilots. So they bring great experience, and I would encourage us to continue to listen to them. And part and parcel, they're at least referenced in one or both of the resolutions, one that's been adopted, one that's on the floor. But unfortunately, their comments aren't reflected in any amendments to the currently airport master plan that's being proposed to be endorsed or adopted. And that's concerning. We've had no opportunity for staff to make any subsequent response to the dialogue and questions that came from council, and indeed from the members of the advisory committee from the 9th of August. And I guess my only other additional comment relative to that is I contacted the chair of the airport advisory committee relative to this, and he was certainly unaware that this item was appearing on a special council meeting. again regarding the airport master plan. So certainly, as I always believe I've done, you put your oars in the water. There's a lot of meat on the bone, and we've got a lot to look forward to out there. I support the aspect as encouraged in the resolution regarding the airport fund. I just encourage that there's opportunity to engage in that to ensure that it's the model that's most appropriate for our community. I just think endorsing the plan is fine. Endorsing the plan and then picking and choosing, and then also it not being necessarily consistent with who's advising us on some of the priorities that would then either be in or be left out of the plan. Example, trees. Absolutely a key priority that's been ongoing out at the airport. It's not in a reference regarding inside the airport master plan. So maybe the one comment I'd make is that any support for endorsement does not preclude the opportunity for additional valuable priorities as we continue to listen to those members from the advisory committee and the general public. Encouraged by the committee I sit on in the master transportation plan and the involvement I've had in the air travel portion. And one of the key ingredients, both Mayor Bradley of Sarnia and myself, is a movement to demonstrate to all stakeholders and taxpayers the core value that small regional community airports have beyond just servicing private pilots. And I've seen it in the experiences that I just gained listening to the people in the industry over the past couple months. And that's part of the messaging I see in the draft plan. And I would encourage, it's going to be a valuable part of how we can not just attract resources for short, mid, and long-term planning, but also how we demonstrate to those that don't have an interest or a stake in there, but they're involved with some of the community assets somewhere else. And we know that we blend those resources together to find out. With that being said, I will call the question for our members of council. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution's carried. It's 4-2. Bylaws. Councillor Parker, you have the bylaws. In advance of you reading the bylaws, I would ask Mr. Pratt if you had the opportunity to welcome, which is actually on here tonight, to appoint a fire chief for the town of Tillsonburg. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Molnar. I am both honored and pleased to introduce our new fire chief, Shane Cascanet, who started last Monday. Shane comes for us most recently from the city of Brantford, and prior to that, he was fire chief in Oshawa. Shane, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to meet everyone tonight. I thank council for entrusting me with this appointment, and it's honestly a pleasure to serve council, the community, and the dedicated men and women of the Tillsonburg Fire Rescue Services. So thank you for the appointment, and I look forward to meeting you all in the near future to have a chat and discuss fire services.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. Welcome. And certainly on behalf of council, and I believe fair to say the residents, stakeholders, the businesses of the town of Tillsonburg who are already extremely well served by the men and women of Tillsonburg Fire and Rescue Services and the dispatch team as well. You're joining a good group, and I look forward to that symmetry benefiting all our stakeholders well into the future. So welcome. Councillor Parker, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Counselor Gilvazy that a bylaw to amend bylaw 3295 and a bylaw to amend bylaw 3810 and a bylaw to authorize an agreement with the province of Ontario, ICIP Community Culture and Recreation Stream, and a bylaw to authorize an agreement with the province of Ontario, ICIP COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream, and a bylaw to appoint a fire chief for the town of Tillsonburg and to repeal bylaw 2021-038 be read for a first, second, third, and final reading, and that the mayor and the clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and the same and place the corporate seal thereunto.
Thank you, Counselor Parker. Counselor, you've certainly had an opportunity to review the bylaws. And I thank council again for their commitment to support the rationalization for the special council meeting, primarily for the VDK. That doesn't prejudice voting on it. That's in front of you now. Are there any questions on any of the bylaws before council this afternoon? Seeing none, we're prepared to call that question. All those in favor? Opposed? That resolution is carried. Along with the confirmation bylaw, Deputy Mayor, please.
I have that. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Luciani that bylaw 2021-090 to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held August 30th, 2021 be read for a first, second, third, and final reading, and that the mayor and the clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign the same and place the corporate seal thereunto.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Council, you've had a chance to hear the resolution. All those in favor? Opposed? That resolution is carried, and we move to adjournment to this specially called council meeting for the town of Tillsonburg. Councilor Gilvazy, you have that resolution, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rosehart that the special council meeting of August 30th, 2021 be adjourned at 4:25 p.m.
Thank you, Councilor. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is carried. Council will stand adjourned until 6 p.m. on the 13th of September. Please enjoy the balance of the time until we get to September, and at some point in the not too distant future, the big yellow buses and the small little kids are going to be wandering around the community a little more excited than they have been in some time. So it's up to us all to be part of that safety. Thanks, everyone.